I can't tell if this guy's imposing or ridiculous. The wing blades don't really help. Gilgamesh from War of Divisions has been released once before as a limited time unit, so chances are that many players don't have him. Like me. To be fair, I probably shouldn't have expected a single rare ticket to get me anything. It's been quite a while since Gilgamesh has first touched down, so let's see how he measures up in the meta right now. First, his Trustmaster reward. That's a subjectively stupid looking helmet, by the way. Anyways, the helmet is clearly suited for hybrid damage dealers, but Gilgamesh isn't exactly the best hybrid damage dealer around. More on that later. Regardless, it's still a decent Trustmaster reward since you can equip it onto many other units. His Super Trustmaster reward, Wings That Transcend Time, is a powerful hybrid Super Trustmaster reward that increases both attack and magic by 60%, and further increases it when the unit is dual-wielding. In the past, many players thought it was amazing when it was first released, and, well, it's still pretty great now. In fact, it's worth spending a Super Trustmaster Mugo on, though you may want to hold off on that decision until we see if we're getting some kind of global exclusive hybrid unit or something with a good Super Trustmaster reward during the anniversary. Alright, let's get to his active abilities. You won't use Kotetsu, and Osmose Force is only needed in situations where the enemy drains his MP. Hammond is a decent attack break, but it's a weak move by itself. Self-Haste is decent for prepping his Limit Burst, though it's a bit of a waste to cast this. It's best to leave that kind of job to a supporter anyways. Defensive Barrier mitigates incoming general damage by 20%, which is pretty weak. Healing Aura is a decent recovery option with a good MP recovery attached to it, though Gilgamesh himself will only have a net increase of 2 MP after using it. Now, let's talk about Gilgamesh's status as a hybrid damage dealer. He really isn't. He only has one move that deals hybrid damage, and that's his Limit Burst. Speaking of which, it's rather powerful and decreases the enemy's ice resistance by an incredible 120% for 5 turns. But the rest of his attacks are either physical or magic oriented, which leads us to an interesting situation. Players can choose to build Gilgamesh as a physical damage dealer or a magic damage dealer, or perhaps go midway and attempt to create a hybrid damage dealer. To make matters clearer, let's get to the rest of his abilities. Instead of splitting them by status like I would normally do, this time I split them based on the type of damage that they deal. First up are the magic attacks. These attacks will chain with the Chaos Wave Awaken family. Frost Blade decreases the enemy's ice resistance by 120%. Excalibur Gleaming Blade is a cooldown ability that partially ignores the enemy's spirit. Now we get to his physical attacks. These attacks will chain with the Absolute Mirror of Equity family. Frozen Flash partially ignores the enemy's defense, and also lowers the enemy's ice resistance by 120%. His physical cooldown ability, Excalibur Shining Blade, also partially ignores the enemy's defense. His last 2 cooldown abilities, Transcendent Wings and Quicken, aren't attacks. Transcendent Wings increases your team's ice resistance by 80%, fills up Gilgamesh's Limit Burst, increases the damage of some of his attacks, and lets him cast 3 abilities for 6 turns. With its cooldown time, you can cycle through it with ease. Quicken will basically fill up anyone's Limit Burst, though it comes at the cost of not being available for a humble cooldown of 99 turns. This cooldown is overkill for something so mundane, though it's true that using a certain Limit Burst at a dangerous situation could be the difference between life or death. Furthermore, it could be used in Dark Visions to attain an extremely high score by using it on a certain unit. So with 2 different attack-oriented builds, excluding hybrid damage, which one should you go for? The situation will vary depending on the enemy you face, but generally, it's better to build him as a physical damage dealer. Why? While the magic attacks have higher modifiers at first, Gilgamesh's Transcendent Wings actually increases the modifier of Frozen Flash, and makes it bypass Frostblade, which didn't get the increase to its modifier at all. Furthermore, while his cooldown abilities receive the equal boost in damage, they can only be used every 3 turns, and as a result, the magic damage abilities will eventually lose to the physical damage abilities in the long run. With that being said, you can certainly build Gilgamesh as a magic damage dealer, and he'll perform perfectly fine in that role. He can equip rods and robes, so there's nothing stopping you from actually making him into an ice magic damage dealer. Keep in mind that he doesn't match up at all to the best magic damage dealers in the game, so you'd probably try to build him that way just for dark visions if anything. He also has 2 innate Dragon Killer pluses, so that's something worth noting. But in the end, the build is up to you. So let's get started by creating a prime rotation. I'll be using him as a physical damage dealer in the setup. On turn 1, you'd use Transcendent Wings and Frozen Flash. On turn 2, you'd use Frozen Flash 3 times. On turn 3, you'd use Frozen Flash twice and then use Excalibur, Shining Blade. On turn 4, you'd use Frozen Flash 3 times. On turn 5, you do the same thing. On turn 6, you'd use Frozen Flash twice and then use Excalibur, Shining Blade. Rinse and repeat. As you can tell, fairly boring. But of course, he is effective, so boring might not be too big of a problem. Before we end, let's talk about his Limit Burst. You may be wondering if his Limit Burst will ever see the light of day, and unfortunately, it probably won't in most builds. Gilgamesh isn't really suited to be a hybrid damage dealer. He's either a physical or magic damage dealer, but rarely both at the same time. Building him as a hybrid damage dealer ends up taking away some power from both ends, as his attacks are one-sided, not mixed. And building Gilgamesh as a pure physical or magical damage dealer sacrifices some stats from the other power source, and it also weakens his hybrid Limit Burst damage. Furthermore, his Limit Burst doesn't bring anything incredible to the table. His 120% Ice Imperil is something that he can already do on command with regular active abilities. And that's something I find particularly interesting about Gilgamesh. At face value, he looks like a hybrid damage dealer. But the more you look into him, the more you realize that he's just a template that you can adjust as you please. He's not incredibly versatile, but there aren't many units that can switch their damage dealing row depending on the content that you plan to go up against. And unlike other units who do have a similar build, Gilgamesh actually works, as his stats and passives are high enough that he can provide some additional firepower for your team. Thanks for watching, and if you liked this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Comment below if you have any thoughts on this unidentified flying object, and feel free to ask if you have any questions.